So last last episode or one of the episodes, whenever it was, we were talking about this underlying feeling that there was something to this whole beaver fur thing, and with the JonBenét Ramsey case. And what I was getting at, and I think where I'm going with this, is that there are certain elements of things involved in the crime that are quite similar. Because, as I say, when you're going to do a crime, you can only do what you know. You can only do or perform what you have experience with. If you're a sloppy criminal, if you're not a good criminal, if you're not consistent, then things are going to be sloppy because you don't do this. You don't do this a lot. There's no precision in what you do. And when we look at the JonBenét Ramsey case, we don't see a lot of precision. In some elements, we see a little bit of precision, but in others, we see um, just I don't want to say that, but we see sort of this inexperience. Let's call it inexperience with the crime scene. And in some cases, John, seems to make it seem like this person came to their busy neighborhood and posted up and sat there for hours watching them, and everybody rode by on Christmas Day. The streets were full on Christmas Day, and this person just drove up and just, blended in with the crowd and wasn't seen, and just fumbled and bumbled his way into the house, and fumbled and bumbled his way upstairs to find the ransom note, uh, and fumbled and bumbled his way downstairs to, no, I'm sorry, not the ransom note, but the earnings reports that he had, the checks, the paycheck stubs that he had, and just, found a pair of pants in his someone suggested that, found a pair of pants or found a coat that he liked of John's, and said, hey, this would be great for my closet. you know and just took it and ran with it. And this intruder just fumbled and bumbled his way through the JonBenét Ramsey home, and just grabbed things that he wanted, knew that there were going to be things in there, and came through for Christmas or the Christmas before, and scoped out the house, and all such as that, and made a decision right then that he was going to at that point have a vendetta against John that wouldn't go away. He couldn't shake it, couldn't get away from it. And so this is the story that John has been telling us, that John Douglas, the former FBI profiler that created FBI profiling and things of that nature, thinks that this person is mad at John. But when we look at some of the behavior that takes place in this case, there's a lot of inconsistencies as to why certain things would happen. And it makes you wonder, if we cannot directly get an answer, can we reconstruct the case? And part of that reconstruction is trying to understand, okay, even if we don't know for certain who was there, some of this stuff that we look at, we can understand what they were wearing, and we can understand or try to piece together what they were doing and with what they were doing with. And that's where this whole discussion of the beaver fur comes in. I was reading an article by Alan Prendergast. See if I can get it. Alan Prendergast. And yeah, there he is. And he wrote an article on JonBenét Ramsey on Westworld or Westword, and senior contributor to Denver Westword, covered JonBenét Ramsey case since its inception in '96. And I think this is it. It is called the JonBenét Ramsey case. Nope. At 25, middle years. And, or that might not be it. There's another one that he wrote that kind of talks about what's been the case since, since we looked at it 30 years ago. Here it goes. Yeah. JonBenét Ramsey, how the investigation got derailed and why it still matters. And this was updated in November 30th of 2024. What's changed since we published this story on Colorado's coldest case 10 years ago? Not much, is what it says. But in the article, um, let me see if I can find it. They talk about, if I remember correctly, they talk about John Ramsey had started a modest computer component business in his basement in the Atlanta suburbs, and built it into a highly successful company, Access Graphics. In Hold on, I guess they don't want me to view it. Thank you. I will proceed as I was. John Ramsey had started a modest computer component business in his basement in the Atlanta suburbs and built it into a highly successful company, Access Graphics. In 1991, Lockheed Martin bought Access and moved its headquarters to Boulder, keeping Ramsey at the helm. By late 1996, the company had reached $1 billion in annual revenues. His wife, Patsy, found the move disconcerting. Boulder, with its liberal politics and causal ways and disdain for mink coats, was a world away from Atlanta, but her husband's growing prosperity helped smooth the way, allowing for elaborate remodeling of their house on 15th Street. And so Patsy comes in with this love of everything beautiful, everything wealthy, everything rich. She didn't really grow up in a wealthy household. I'm not saying that they were just broke, but her parents came out of, modest beginnings and stuff like that. So they kind of knew what it was to struggle a little bit at times. I believe everybody's family goes through a little bit of struggle every now and again. By the end of the session, let's skip back up. So I'm skipping around to the point in which there was a confrontation or an issue with what happened with the whites. Um, um, and why the situation deteriorated. It says, over the next couple of days, as the JonBenét case began to make headlines, Fleet heard wild speculations on talk radio about John Ramsey's son from a previous marriage. He called the police, demanding a press release stating what the cops and insiders knew to be true, that the young man wasn't even in Boulder when the crime occurred. He says he received an angry call from one of John's attorneys, Brian Morgan of Haddon Morgan and Foreman, warning him not to interfere. Okay. Prendergast continues by saying that the situation deteriorated further when the whites flew to Atlanta for JonBenét's funeral. They were expected to stay at the home of Rod Westmoreland, John Ramsey's financial advisor, which is also his friend. But the whites felt ill at ease among the Ramseys' Atlanta friends and alarmed at the direction things seemed to be heading. I'd never been to the South before, Priscilla says, Priscilla White. It was very different from Colorado or California, because they come from California. Priscilla and Fleet come from California, I think. At least Fleet. Very pretentious. Maids, everybody was drinking champagne. I finally looked at the woman who was supposed to be our hostess and said, "We can't stay here. You don't know what we've just been through, and you're worried about whether we're using your Baccarat crystal glasses." So all of a sudden, we were the crazy ones. Prendergast continues by saying several accounts of the trip to Atlanta have claimed that there was a blow-up between Fleet White and John Ramsey. Some have even hinted that the meltdown had something to do with JonBenét's murder. The Ramseys' own account in their book, The Death of Innocence, doesn't go that far, but it does portray the whites as unduly agitated, and Fleet's behavior, in particular, as erratic, unreasonable, and vaguely threatening. I tell you what, if you guys remember, we talked about this. Patsy, Patsy was Patsy. I think she talked about it in the book or in the interviews. How she she I think her mom, herself, and Burke, Fleet White came over the house. So Patsy says. Fleet White came over the house just, screaming and raging, and you're just mad at the world and mad at everyone. And John, you come out and you speak for yourself, and John, you got to do this. And they supposedly thought, Fleet was just so, erratic that, you know, Patsy said that they had to go hide in the basement until the air was, and that was just her, Burke, and man, her mother's name slipped my mind. Nidra. Her, Nidra, and Burke went down to the basement and just hid themselves until everything was everything blew over. And so the Whites' version of what happened, supported to a significant degree by contemporaneous notes and conversations with detectives, is quite different. There was no blow up, they insisted, just a somewhat testy conversation between Fleet and Westmoreland. So it wasn't even about John, who took him aside and told him to back off. Right? So Rod is telling Fleet to back off, and he's like, back off of what? So from what we know is that Fleet is coming down to Atlanta. I'm here for the Fleet is there for the so Fleet is saying, I'm here for the funeral, yeah, but we got to get to this intruder person who's done this to JonBenét. JonBenét was, like family to me, and she was a close friend to my kids. So we got to figure. I don't know what you guys are doing. You guys are sitting around drinking champagne, toasting, acting like everything's good, and we trying to figure out who this person is who is on the loose. You guys don't seem to be interested in that. And that's what Fleet had a problem with. And so you have what it looks like a couple of people telling Fleet, back off. Stop doing what you're doing. Back off of what? Trying to figure out what a killer is. And you guys are trying to stop me. So, from a place, the Ramseys had lawyers, private investigators, and a crisis management firm to look after them now, Westmoreland explained, and they were planning on staying in Atlanta. I got really pissed, Fleet says. I said, you don't do that, and it's not going to go anybody's way. And I told Priscilla, we've got to get out of here and go talk to John. The Whites visited with Jeff Ramsey, John's brother, then tracked down John at the home of Patsy's parents, Don and Nidra Paul. Conversation was passionate, but hardly menacing. The Whites say, we just laid out a case for John and about why he needed to go back to Boulder. Fleet recalls, I told him, what you do in the next 24 hours is going to define the rest of your life. He didn't lie. You need to talk to the cops. Patsy needs to talk to the cops. We all need to do that and find out what happened to JonBenét. Huh. Ramsey listened calmly, leaving the room a couple times to take phone calls. The Whites assumed he was speaking with his attorneys. Patsy was nowhere to be seen, which Patsy said she wasn't. At one point, John returned and announced that he was going to offer a $50,000 reward for information about his daughter's death. And then Priscilla said, you're going to sound like OJ. By the end of the session, Ramsey was assuring the Whites that he and Patsy would return to Boulder. Far from being incensed, the Ramseys invited the couple to brunch at the Paws on New Year's Day. Now, this is consistent with what the interviews are saying, in terms of Patsy being nowhere to be found, and the police had also said that John and Patsy said that they would return and speak to police. So here they are telling Fleet and Priscilla, and they didn't do it. But anyways, they were invited to brunch at the Paws on New Year's Day. The Whites arrived and learned that John and Patsy were scheduled to appear on CNN later that day. Priscilla helped Patsy, who was still heavily medicated, get ready for her close-up, urging her not to wear her diamond ring and mink coat. John Ramsey would later claim that it was Fleet White's idea for the parents to appear on national television and defend themselves. Fleet denies it, saying He was intent on getting the Ramseys to cooperate with police. Priscilla remembers the two men sitting um, together on the couch that morning, talking earnestly and holding hands for several minutes before the Whites left for the airport. And so, going back to what they said earlier, what he wrote earlier in this article about Atlanta just kind of being the breeding grounds in a sense for this sort of lofty lifestyle, at least in the area that they were in, and sort of accepting of that lifestyle that Patsy had. And so Patsy is going to go everywhere that she can. It taps into the mindset. She's going to go wherever she wants, wherever she can, wearing her diamond ring. Boom, I'm blinging, I'm shining. Why would I not? I bought this. It's mine. Y'all need to know the boss is in the room. Here is my diamond ring and here is my mink coat. I didn't buy this mink coat not to wear it. So obviously when you buy something like that, you're going to wear it. A lot of places. If you go to, I mean, we're well past trying to be modest. we're well past trying to be humble. You know what I mean? That's not, Patsy's like, no. I don't care what you mountainers, how you guys feel about me coming to Colorado, blinging and shining all over the place. I don't care nothing about that. I'm from Atlanta, or I'm coming from Atlanta. I come from humble beginnings. I waited a long time to stunt. I was a pageant queen, and there is no more room for humility. You guys gonna have to see me. And that's what she did. She showed up to Boulder from Atlanta wearing expensive things. Right? So we see a pattern. And when the police talked to her, as we discussed, when the police talked to her and they said, "Hey, can you tell us about some of the clothes that you own, some of the jackets and things of that nature?" "Oh yeah, I got a mink coat. You know, I got these high price ski boots, after ski boots. You know, we got furs, we got this and that. Is it fake? No, no, it's not fake. It's real." So we know, even though you guys are not the only people who wear expensive things, in this case, in this context, you guys have a lot of expensive things. But what we're being told to believe is that the beaver fur, let me just go ahead and read this. The beaver fur, the behavioral properties of the beaver fur and their implications. The beaver fur possesses physical characteristics that are directly relevant to forensic transfer. It's a dense composed, it's dense, composed of thick insulating fur, insulating underfur, and long guard hairs, and is known to shed under conditions of friction and repeated contact. Skip, skip, skip. The At the same time, down here at the bottom is where I'm skipping to. At the same time, beaver fur garments are not casual or disposable items. Retail data indicates such garments range from several $1,000s, even small accessories costing hundreds. Introduces a second layer of behavioral consideration. Individuals committing high-risk crimes don't typically select expensive, distinctive, and high-shedding clothing as part of their operational approach. I am zeroing in on expensive because Patsy, as this writer, and this would say you bring it all together, Patsy, as Prendergast is showing us, shows up to Atlanta, wants to wear her mink coat to show and her diamond ring to show everybody she's balling. Now, you're not gonna take your diamond ring off. I get that, but she wants to, maybe it's out of touch with normal people, but I mean, she bought the coat to wear it. I mean, you can't hate on her for that. It's up to, what do you expect me to do? Not wear my mink coat because you don't like it because you don't have one? Absolutely not. So I respect her for that. I'm not mad at her for that. I guess what I'm saying is that there is consistency in behavior that those things have to be worn. I'm going to wear it, right? I'm going to wear my mink coat. Yeah. So if the mink coat begins to be a center focus, we know why. Because Patsy's wearing it all the time. I'm going to take it to Atlanta. I'm going to go on television and I'm going to look my best. I'm not going to say that. But the fact of the matter is, Patsy is expressing her wealth through her clothing. She and in her mind, we know that because Patsy did not grow up wealthy like that. In her, she's learned to be wealthy. We call it new money, right? I don't think John grew up wealthy like that. We call it new money, not old money, because of the way that you sort of conduct yourself, right? We're going out and we're spending money like money ain't a thing, right? We're going out and getting boats. We're going out and getting houses. We got boats. We got houses in a couple states, right? John had a couple of boats. John had like a couple of planes. I'm balling out here. Patsy's like, yeah, money ain't a thing. I got mink fur. You know what I'm saying? I got mink coats. I got mink hats. I got a diamond ring, right? I got leather boots. We throwing parties. We throwing themed parties for like 30, 40,000. We are like, what are we talking about? If we put like $40,000, like $30,000, if we put that, use a factor of 2.08, I think 40K in 1996 times 2.08, it's like $83,000 on a party that she's doing. She's spending $83,000 on a party. That should let you know how much money Patsy was spending. And that's why I say, y'all gonna go broke somewhere around here. Y'all gonna go broke even before this. Y'all just went broke faster. But you were gonna always go broke. The way you guys were spending, your spending was out of control. And that's why I call it new money, because they don't know how to handle money. They act like they've never been there. They try to get financial advisors and things of that nature, but John is trying to invest in different businesses and stuff like that with Pasta J, and they have the Pasta J restaurant, and then they have another, other businesses that I think he and Michael Bynum and Pasta J were, trying to go in on. I think according to some of the documentation, when I can't remember the guy's name, but it was a photographer, and I can't remember that guy's name right off the top of my head. I don't want to say Hoffman. It's not Hoffman. No, it's not Hoffman at all. But it was a guy who we talked about before, if you remember. He was a photographer, and it wasn't he I almost want to link him to Jeff Shapiro, who was also a photographer from the Globe or something like that, who was trying to chase down leads and stuff like that. But it was another guy who was taking pictures, and John they say John attacked him, coming out of this new restaurant that they were all at. And John attacked him, was like, hey, what are you doing here? So on and so forth. So John is putting money in these different business ventures and stuff like that. And they're spending money like I don't even think, you know, they're spending money like crazy. And I don't even know if John is bringing in that much money. But anyways, what I'm getting at is that there is very expensive taste. There's an expensive lifestyle. There are expensive habits, and those habits don't just go away. Those habits tend to just filter into life. They filter into everything. They filter into your conversation. They filter into your behavior, and they find a way to make themselves known or apparent in some of the weirdest at some of the weirdest times, off the cuff times. Like when we think about Priscilla in this article, Priscilla is saying, "Hey, before going to speak to America, you probably don't want to bling bling. You probably don't want to bling bling out the camera. You probably don't want to wear your mink coat, because that could give off a bad impression. So we probably don't want to wear the mink coat. But Patsy is wearing the mink coat because she wants to. And so when we ask them different things like, hey, why weren't you guys wearing shoes? Or why weren't you guys? Why don't we see your shoes? Can you tell me what shoes? I think the investigators asked. Can you tell us what shoes that you were wearing the night of? Oh, I don't remember. Maybe I was. And Patsy was like, maybe I was wearing these gray or these black leather boots. Maybe I was wearing these black leather boots the night of. But we can't remember. John was like, but we can't remember because the picture didn't show our shoes, so we can't remember what shoes we were wearing. I do wonder if the shoes you were wearing would be central to the case at all. Can you even give us a hint, maybe, of what you might wear or something like that? Because what you're telling, it's not just about telling me that you don't remember what you were wearing. It's about telling me what you probably would have wore. Oh, with that outfit, I had some Steve Maddens. I probably would have wore those or something like that. Yeah. Oh, with that outfit, I typically like, so Patsy dresses me. I would have wore something like that. Okay, gives us a sort of range, but we don't get that. We get just this completely unhelpful answer of I don't know what who wore what. Oh, I don't know what I wore. Maybe I don't make myself clear. We're trying to solve the murder of your daughter, and these little short answers are not helpful. But in lieu of your answers, we start to see that if expensive furs end up in the home, they could be attributed for good reason to John and Patsy. And it would be reasonable to believe that. Whether we're saying that they could be attached to the animal hairs or not, it could be attributed to John and Patsy because they own furs. They own mink coats. They own a little bit of leopard print, um, and that's like fur material. They own those things, and it's of high quality. It's not just that you own. We're not talking about faux leather. We're talking about real stuff. And Patsy was adamant about that. Is it fake? The investigators asked. No, it's real. It's real fur. I don't buy no fake stuff. Right? So when we look at the beaver, I would suspect that the beaver would probably be real. And the problem I would have with that is if the beaver is real, I have a hard time looking at anybody else because you tend to wear real animal fur. And I just think that the coincidences are stunningly similar. Just stunning. The more we look at this case, as you know, the more we find things that, I mean, you can make it fit into the intruder narrative. I mean, you can finagle it however you want to do. But I don't know, man. I feel like it's consistent with you guys as well. And that would be reasonable. And if we take the consistency of expensive tastes for the Ramseys, obviously we know that, oh, it doesn't mean that it was them. No, we're not saying that if we isolate this, right? But as you analyze it the way we have, you will see that there is a consistency of things that they try to point out as pointing, exclusively to the intruder. But we can come back and say, well, maybe so. That's a probability. It's a possibility. It's probability for that. But I mean, it could also point to you. I mean, the statistics say that it's probably 70 to 90% going to be you. Statistics from the top. That's what the FBI said. From the top, FBI already said it's highly likely that it's going to be you. We're over 50%. Not only that, when we talk about some of the things that were left at the crime scene, these are clothes that are similar to what you wore that very night. When we analyze that in connection with the changing stories about the time that you got home, we become more concerned. When we look at some of the fiber evidence that includes some things that are similar to what you wore, when you tell us one thing and your son tells us another, we grow increasingly concerned that you may not be telling us the truth, is my concern. Um, and I don't say that to accuse you. I say that to say that this is where things seem to be pointing. Because if you tell me that this intruder is walking around in expensive clothing to commit this crime, and JonBenét was able to capture, some skin, right? This had to be in a time period where, or around a time period before JonBenét was at her wit's end. And I hate to say it like that. Extremely sad to say it like that. But at a time right before JonBenét was at her wit's end, before she had to pull her attention to the cord, and she had to try to thumb it out. She had an opportunity to reach and grab your skin, make contact with the skin, and pull it up under her fingernails. But somewhere along the line, the DNA is getting distorted because we point to the unknown male DNA, but we forget to point to the inclusion of DNA possibly from Patsy and Burke. That's what concerns me. And when I look at stuff like this, and it almost, I make the point because I say that to say there is a fingerprint. What we are looking for is a fingerprint. When they look at the ransom note, and the ransom note is like, well, dang, that looks like what Patsy would do. And we look at some of the trace evidence, and it's like, oh, it could be Patsy. Well, why would Patsy even be involved in this? Oh, it could be Burke too. How would it be Burke? Because Burke was asleep, and they couldn't even find this garment. How would this be? They said they washed it. How would this be attached to Burke and Patsy? No John. That's weird. There is a consistent fingerprint, and that's what I was talking about in the other video, the underlying fingerprint that continues to show up. Because at this point, we are not talking about a one-off thing, right? We're talking about multiple things that attach. Because it's easy to say, well, it could have been. Right, correct. But we're talking about taken together. What's the what's the probability that all of these things together would be an outside person? Because if we're going to say that it could be an outside person, let's name what that person might look like. Do we have evidence in our memory that any person has ever been similar to this? We have a lot of crime, as you'd be surprised to know, and maybe you don't. A lot of crime has happened in our history as humans. I mean, there is a crime case for almost everything that we see. Enough for us to be able to profile and make an estimated judgment that is almost accurate about what happened. Oh yeah, well, probably frustration and jealousy with her husband, and she'd been dealing with this for years, and he did this, and it just set her off. Last straw. So this is what she did. This was her response. Open and shut. But it's only when things start to get hidden like this do we have a problem. And typically, once we figure out who did what and what the end result was, we can kind of piece it together and say, oh, classic case of this. And as we are doing now, we look at that and we say, oh, we are teetering forward on saying, oh, classic case of. Let me know what you think in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe. I want to touch on a little bit more of some of this that I just, I want to keep reading through this and touch on it a little bit more and go a little bit deeper to kind of flesh this out. But like I said, hope you're doing well. Thank you for everybody who's contributing, showing love, liking, sharing, and subscribing, and hyping up the channel, donating monetarily, becoming members. Shout out to all my members in the channel. Much love to you. Thanks for subscribing and signing up and joining as a member. I appreciate you so much. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're staying alive and staying safe. And wherever you are, maybe you're staying out of the heat, maybe you're staying out of the cold. Hope all is well with you. And if not, sending prayers and thoughts to you and your family. But yeah, let me know what you think. Take it easy.